Welcome. This video covers the very first foundational principle from the Gang of Four book: program to an interface, not an implementation. It sounds simple, but it is the bedrock idea that almost every design pattern in the catalog is built on. By the end, you will know what it means, why it matters, and exactly when to apply it. Here is the pain. Imagine you write an order service that directly creates and calls a MySQL database object. Everything works until you need to switch to PostgreSQL or use an in-memory database in your tests. Because your service was written against the concrete class MySQL database, every line that touches it is now in the way. You have to open those files and change them. The more places you did this, the bigger the problem gets. This is called tight coupling, and it is exactly the pain this principle exists to solve. Think about a power outlet. The wall does not care what you plug in. It exposes a contract, a specific shape and voltage, and anything that honors that contract just works. You can swap a lamp for a fan without touching the wiring behind the wall. That is exactly the relationship we want between our classes. The client defines a contract, and any implementation that honors it can be plugged in freely. The principle has three participants. First, the interface, a declared contract that lists what operations are available with no implementation details. Second, the concrete class, the real object that carries out those operations. Third, the client, the code that needs to do work. The key rule is that the client declares its dependency using the interface type, never the concrete class name. Who supplies the concrete object is a separate concern, often handled by a constructor parameter or a factory. Let us walk through this step by step. First, we declare the logger interface with a single method, log, that takes a string. That is the contract. Next, we write two concrete classes, console logger and file logger, both marked implements logger, so TypeScript will enforce that they honor the contract. Then comes the client, order service. Its constructor accepts a parameter typed as logger, the interface, not any concrete class. Inside place order, it calls this .logger.log, which is valid for any logger. Finally, at the wiring step, the caller passes in whichever concrete object it wants. To switch from console logging to file logging, we change exactly one line, the wiring line, and order service itself is untouched. Here is what is actually happening at runtime. The client holds a variable whose declared type is the interface. TypeScript and the runtime only guarantee that it has the methods listed on that interface. The concrete class behind it could be anything. This indirection is the mechanism of decoupling. You can add a third or fourth implementation without touching the client at all. The same mechanism makes testing clean. Your test can pass in a handwritten stub that implements the interface, and the client never knows the difference. The cost is a small amount of extra indirection and more types to manage. Worth it when implementations vary, less worth it when they never will. Use this principle whenever your code needs to work with more than one version of a dependency, or when you want clean unit tests that do not spin up real databases or real HTTP clients. It is also essentially required anytime you reach for a Gang of Four pattern, because nearly all of them rely on clients that depend on abstractions. Skip it when there is genuinely only one implementation and no realistic chance of a second. Adding an interface there just adds noise. A good rule of thumb: if you cannot name a second concrete class you might actually create, the interface is probably premature. To summarize, program to an interface means your client code should only know about the contract, the declared type, never the specific class behind it. The concrete object is handed in from outside, keeping the client blissfully unaware of implementation details. This single habit gives you swappable behavior, easier testing, and is the prerequisite for almost every design pattern you will learn next in this course.